The morning sky above New York blazed with unusual colors when they first arrived. It wasn't the dramatic entrance humanity had imagined for its first alien contact. Just a single ship, battered and worn, limping into orbit like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Military commands worldwide went into high alert. News channels interrupted their regular broadcasts. Social media exploded with theories and panic. But the ship made no aggressive moves. Instead, it transmitted a simple message in multiple Earth languages. We come with a warning. Please help. The United Nations convened an emergency session within hours. The ship's captain, who called himself Reed, appeared before them via hologram. He looked almost human, except for his silvery skin and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of space itself. I represent what remains of the Galactic Alliance. Reed began, his voice heavy with exhaustion. My ship is part of the Great Evacuation Fleet. We've been warning all civilized worlds we can find. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. There's something coming. Something that has already consumed 12 galaxies. The assembly hall remained silent, hundreds of world leaders frozen in their seats. We call them the Void Swarm, Reed continued. They don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They simply consume every world, every star, every trace of civilization. He waved his hand, and a holographic map appeared, showing massive sections of the galaxy going dark. Most advanced species are already fleeing to the Andromeda Galaxy. We're here to offer Earth a place in the evacuation fleet. The American president stood first. How much time do we have? At their current speed, they'll reach your solar system in approximately 5 Earth years. Murmurs filled the hall. The Chinese premier spoke next. And these evacuation ships, they can carry all of humanity. We can save about 30% of your population, Reed replied quietly. We've found that's usually enough to preserve a species' culture and genetic diversity. The hall erupted in outrage. 30% meant leaving billions behind. The Secretary General called for order, pounding his gavel until the chaos subsided. And if we fight? The question came from the back of the hall. General Emma Stone, head of Earth's Combined Military Command, stepped forward. What happens if we stand our ground? Reed's expression shifted to something between pity and confusion. Fighting isn't an option. The Void Swarm has overwhelmed civilizations thousands of years more advanced than Earth. Worlds with defensive systems that could destroy stars. None of them could stop the swarm. General Stone smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. You haven't answered my question, Captain. What happens if we fight? You die, Reed said simply. Everyone dies. That's why we run. The Japanese defense minister stood. How many worlds have actually fought back? Not fled, but really fought. Reed blinked. None. The math is clear. Fighting means extinction. No, General Stone corrected. The math is incomplete. You don't have data on what happens when someone stands their ground because nobody has. She turned to address the assembly. We're being asked to abandon 7 billion people based on an assumption that fighting is hopeless. The hall grew quiet again, but this time it was different. It was the silence of people thinking, calculating, considering. Reed watched in confusion as something unexpected happened. Instead of panic or resignation, he saw determination spread across the faces before him. These humans, these primitives from a backwater world, were actually considering fighting an enemy that had made advanced civilizations run in terror. The Secretary General called for a vote. The question was simple: evacuate or fight. The result shocked Reed to his core. Nation after nation chose to stand their ground. Not a single vote for evacuation. This is madness, Reed protested. You don't understand what you're facing. No, General Stone replied. You don't understand what you're facing. She stepped closer to Reed's hologram. You see, Captain, humans have never needed to be the strongest or the fastest. We just need to be stubborn enough to keep getting back up. And we're very, very good at that. As Reed's hologram flickered out, the real work began. Humanity had 5 years to prepare for war, and they intended to use every second of it. What the Void Swarm didn't know, what even Reed didn't understand, was that they had just threatened the one species in the galaxy that had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day of their existence. And humanity had not just survived that world, they had conquered it. 2 weeks after Captain Reed's warning, Dr. Thomas Wells stood in his lab at the Global Defense Research Center, staring at data that made his hands shake with excitement. Around him, screens displayed information about thousands of alien worlds, shared by Reed's ship. "This can't be right," he muttered, but the numbers didn't lie. He grabbed his phone and called General Stone. "You need to see this. Now." 3 hours later, the room was packed with military leaders and scientists from around the world. Dr. Wells stood before them, trying to contain his excitement. "We've been asking the wrong question," he began, pulling up images of different planets. "We kept asking how we could fight an enemy that defeated civilizations more advanced than us. But look at these worlds, the homes of these advanced species." The images showed beautiful planets with perfect weather, gentle gravity, and peaceful environments. Paradise worlds. "Now, look at Earth." He switched to images of Earth's harshest environments. The freezing poles, burning deserts, crushing ocean depths, and raging storms. "We didn't just evolve on a different world. We evolved on what they would call a death world." The room grew quiet as understanding began to dawn. Every alien species in the database evolved in perfect conditions. Wells continued. "Their bodies are adapted for ease. But humans," he grinned, "we're built for survival in the harshest conditions imaginable." General Stone leaned forward. "Explain." "Their average world has 70% of Earth's gravity. Their bones break easily. Their muscles are weaker. They've never dealt with extreme temperature changes." Wells pulled up more data. "Even their most elite warriors would struggle to survive a day in our harshest environments. But humans, we climb Mount Everest for fun. We dive into crushing ocean depths. We run marathons in the desert." A scientist from India stood up. "Are you saying our weakness is actually our strength?" "Exactly." Wells pointed to new diagrams. "Our bodies are built to handle more punishment. Our minds are wired to adapt faster. We're literally designed by evolution to do what they think is impossible. Survive in conditions that should kill us." The room buzzed with excitement as Wells continued. "But here's the real advantage. We don't just survive harsh conditions. We learn to use them, to master them." He pulled up military testing data. "Our soldiers can fight in any environment. Snow, desert, jungle, underwater. Doesn't matter. We've been training for this our entire existence without knowing it." General Stone smiled as she understood. "So while these advanced species built technology to avoid facing harsh conditions, we built technology to help us push even further into them," Wells finished. "And that's where Project Thunderstorm comes in." He revealed the final slide, a massive engineering project that made several people gasp. Instead of trying to match their advanced technology, Wells explained, "We're going to use what we know best, Earth's extreme conditions. We're going to turn our harsh environment into a weapon." The room erupted in discussion as Wells showed the details. They would build massive weather control stations, create artificial storms that would tear apart enemy ships, use gravity wells that would crush their weaker bodies, deploy weapons that could function in conditions that would destroy their delicate technology. Captain Reed, who had stayed on Earth to help, watched from the back of the room with growing amazement. These humans weren't just refusing to run, they were finding ways to use their harsh world as an advantage. "There's something else," Wells added, silencing the room. "The Void Swarm has never faced a species that actually fights back. They've never needed to adapt or change their tactics. But humans," he smiled, "adaptation is what we do best." As the meeting ended, General Stone approached Reed. "Still think we're making a mistake?" Reed looked at the project plans again. then at the determined faces around him. For the first time since the Void Swarm appeared, he felt something new: hope. "I think," he said slowly, "that the Void Swarm has no idea what they're about to face." He paused. "Neither do I, and that's what makes it brilliant." The next day, Project Thunderstorm began. Earth would become more than a fortress. It would become a weapon. And humanity would show the galaxy why sometimes the harshest worlds produce the strongest fighters. 3 years into Earth's preparation, the planet had changed beyond recognition. Where once there were cities, now stood massive fortress complexes. The old borders between nations had disappeared, replaced by defensive zones designed around natural barriers. Major Tom Walker stood at the command center of Weather Control Station Alpha, watching as another test storm raged across the training grounds. Below, soldiers in advanced combat suits marched through winds that would tear apart any alien ship. They called themselves the Storm Walkers now, the first military unit specifically trained to fight in engineered superstorms. "Report," he called out to the control room. "Storm intensity at 400% normal hurricane levels," replied Lieutenant Rogers. "Combat suits performing at optimal levels. The alien tech we integrated is holding up perfectly." Tom smiled. The suits were a perfect example of human innovation. They had taken the advanced alien technology from Reed's ship and made it tougher, stronger, able to withstand conditions that would have shocked its original creators. A familiar silver-skinned figure approached the observation window. Captain Reed had become a common sight at these facilities, his initial doubt replaced by growing respect. "Your people continue to surprise me," Reed said, watching the soldiers below. "We would have considered these conditions unsurvivable. You turned them into a training ground." "That's not the best part," Tom replied. "Show him, Lieutenant." Rogers pressed a button, and part of the training ground transformed. The ground split open, revealing massive generators that could create localized gravity, wells up to 3 times Earth's normal gravity. "Our soldiers train at triple gravity now," Tom explained. "Makes them even stronger when they fight at normal levels. We're building similar systems into our orbital defenses." Reed shook his head in amazement. "You're not just preparing to survive the swarm. You're preparing to hunt them." Before Tom could respond, an alarm sounded. General Stone's face appeared on the main screen, her expression serious. "We're moving up the timeline," she announced. "Our deep space sensors just picked up swarm activity. They're moving faster than expected. We have 18 months, not 2 years." The room fell silent, but Tom noticed something interesting. There was no panic, no fear, just determined faces and people moving faster to their stations. "Project Thunderstorm?" General Stone asked. "Ahead of schedule," Tom reported. "We can have the global weather control network online in 6 months. The gravity defense systems in 8. The Earth Defense Force. 10 million troops trained in extreme condition combat. Another 5 million in final training. The Storm Walker units are combat ready." General Stone nodded. "And the special project?" Tom glanced at Reed before answering. "The atmospheric conversion system is ready. Once activated, we can turn Earth's entire atmosphere into a weapon. Any ship entering without our specific shielding will be torn apart." Reed stepped forward. "General, I've contacted the remnants of the Galactic Fleet. Some want to return, to fight alongside Earth." "Why?" Stone asked, though her slight smile suggested she knew the answer. "Because in all our running, we never saw anyone prepare like this. You're not just building defenses. You're turning your entire world into a fortress that fights back." The general's smile grew stronger. "Tell them they're welcome, if they're ready to learn how to fight our way." After the call ended, Tom led Reed to the underground levels where the real surprise waited. They stopped at a massive vault door marked Project Thunder God. "There's one thing we haven't shown you yet," Tom said, entering a code. The door slid open, revealing a massive chamber filled with strange machinery. "What is this?" Reed asked, staring at the complex network of devices. We studied the data about the Void Swarm's attacks. They've never faced a planet that could fight back with its own natural forces, so we're going to show them what Earth can really do. Tom gestured at the machines. This system doesn't just control storms, it can harness every destructive natural force on Earth. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, sun emissions, all weaponized and controlled. Reed looked at the machinery with new understanding. You're not just making Earth a fortress, he whispered. You're turning the entire planet into a weapon. Exactly, Tom said, watching the system's pulse with power. The swarm thinks they're hunting us. They don't realize they're walking into a trap 18 months in the making. And when they get here, they'll learn why you should never corner a species that turned a death world into their home. The first signs of the Void Swarm appeared near Jupiter's orbit. The massive gas giant's space monitoring station picked up thousands of black shapes emerging from deep space, moving like a cloud of locusts against the stars. Commander Jack Wilson stood on the bridge of the EDS Thunder, Earth's first star carrier, watching the enemy approach. The ship, like everything humanity had built in the last 4 years, was designed to use harsh conditions as a weapon. All stations report ready, his second-in-command reported. Stormwalker squads are in position. Show me the enemy formation, Jack ordered. The main screen lit up, displaying the Void Swarm's approach. They moved with perfect precision, like a single mind controlling countless bodies. Too perfect, too predictable. Jack smiled. His years of training in chaos tactics were about to pay off. Launch Operation Chaos, he commanded. Across the Jupiter defense zone, hundreds of human ships broke formation. To an outside observer, it would have looked like panic. Ships moving in random directions, seeming to flee in disorder. But there was a method to this madness. The Void Swarm responded exactly as expected. Their perfect formation split apart, spreading out to chase what they thought were easy targets. They took the bait, Jack announced. Execute Phase 2. That's when humanity showed their first card. The seemingly retreating ships suddenly released their special weapons, miniature gravity bombs designed to create zones of crushing force. The swarm's lighter ships, built for the weaker gravity of their home systems, began crumpling like paper toys. First blood to humanity, someone cheered. But the swarm adapted quickly. Their larger ships moved forward, protected by stronger shields. That's when Jack revealed humanity's second advantage. Stormwalkers, you're up. From the belly of the Thunder and other carriers, small craft shot out. Inside each one, soldiers in advanced combat suits waited eagerly. These weren't normal troops. They were humans trained to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. The Stormwalkers landed on the larger swarm ships, using their suits to survive the vacuum of space, where alien crews would have been crushed by the artificial gravity shifts. Human soldiers moved freely, fighting their way through the ships. Sir, his tactical officer called out, we're getting readings from inside the swarm ships. They're panicking. Jack nodded. They've never faced an enemy that could board their ships. Never had to fight hand-to-hand. He watched as more Stormwalker teams breached enemy vessels. They don't know how to handle chaos. The battle raged for hours. The Void Swarm kept trying to form their perfect patterns, to fight with their usual tactics. But humanity had trained for this, had prepared to be unpredictable. Then came the moment that would change everything. A Stormwalker team, led by Captain Lisa Hayes, broke into what seemed to be a swarm command ship. Their helmet cameras broadcast what they found to every human ship in the system. The Void Swarm weren't the unstoppable force everyone feared. They were creatures used to fighting from safety, relying on their technology and perfect formations. When faced with heavily armored humans who could survive in any environment, who fought with controlled chaos, they didn't know how to respond. Send word to Earth, Jack ordered as he watched another swarm ship fall to Stormwalker teams. The enemy can bleed, and more importantly, they can feel fear. The battle for Jupiter's orbit lasted 3 more hours, When it ended, the first wave of the Void Swarm had been decimated. The few surviving ships fled back into deep space, leaving their destroyed companions floating in Jupiter's orbit. Captain Reed, watching from Earth's command center, couldn't believe his eyes. In all their recorded attacks, the swarm has never retreated. Never. General Stone stood beside him, watching the battle recordings. "They've never faced humans before," she said simply. "We don't just survive chaos. We thrive in it, and now they know it." As recovery ships moved to collect swarm wreckage for study, the message spread throughout human space. The first battle was over. Humanity hadn't just survived, they had won. And they had learned something crucial. The galaxy's greatest predators could be beaten. The real war was just beginning. But now the hunters had become the hunted. 1 month after the Battle of Jupiter, Earth activated Project Thunderstorm in full for the first time. The whole planet hummed with power as thousands of weather control stations came online at once. Dr. Wells stood in the main control room of Project Thunderstorm, surrounded by screens showing weather patterns across the globe. Beside him, General Stone watched as the largest military operation in human history began. "All stations report ready," a technician announced. "Global weather grid is online." "Begin the sequence," Wells ordered, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they were about to attempt. Across Earth, massive machines roared to life. The sky darkened as engineered superstorms formed over every major defense zone. But these weren't normal storms. They were weapons designed to reach into space itself. Incoming. The warning blared through every speaker. The main Void Swarm fleet had arrived, filling Earth's orbit with thousands of ships. Their black hulls blocked out the stars, creating an artificial night. General Stone picked up her command mic. "Execute Operation Thunder God." The response was beyond anything even the project designers had imagined. The superstorms merged into a single, planet-wide tempest. Lightning bolts the size of cities shot into space, tearing through swarm ships like paper. Hurricane-force winds, enhanced by gravity generators, created shearing forces that ripped apart enemy vessels. "It's working," Wells shouted over the rumble of machinery. "The swarm can't maintain their formation in these conditions." In orbit, Commander Wilson watched from the thunder as Earth itself seemed to come alive. The planet looked like an angry god, wrapped in storms and lightning, reaching out to smash its enemies. "Stormwalker teams, launch now," he ordered. Hundreds of drop pods shot from Earth's surface, carrying Stormwalker troops through the chaos. Where swarm ships would have been torn apart by the artificial tempest, human vessels pushed through, protected by technology designed for exactly these conditions. Captain Reed, who had joined the Earth Defense Force, led one of the assault teams. His pod crashed through a swarm command ship's hull, and he emerged with his human squad mates into the enemy vessel. "They never expected this," he transmitted back to Earth Command. "They're not just losing. They're terrified. No species has ever turned an entire planet into a weapon before." The battle raged for hours. Every time the swarm tried to regroup, Earth's storms would shift and change, creating new patterns of destruction. The planet had become a living weapon, guided by human hands. Then came the moment that changed everything. A massive swarm ship, larger than all the others, moved into position above Earth's North Pole. It was clearly their command center, directing the entire invasion. "Now," General Stone ordered, "show them what Earth can really do." Deep beneath the planet's surface, Project Thunder God's final phase activated. The Earth's magnetic field itself became a weapon. A massive pulse of electromagnetic energy, combined with the artificial storms, created a destructive wave that rippled through space. The swarm's command ship, along with hundreds of their vessels, simply came apart. Their advanced technology, designed for perfect conditions, couldn't handle the raw power of a weaponized planet. "Look," Wells pointed to his screens. The remaining swarm ships were retreating, breaking formation for the first time in their known history. they're running. But humanity wasn't finished. The Stormwalker teams had captured dozens of swarm ships intact, along with their navigation data. Earth now knew where they came from and how to find them. In the aftermath, as the storms calmed and the sky cleared, Captain Reed stood with General Stone watching recovery teams collect enemy wreckage. "You did more than win a battle," Reed said quietly. "You changed everything we thought we knew about warfare, about survival." Stone nodded. "We didn't just defend Earth. We showed the galaxy that sometimes the best weapon isn't the most advanced technology. Sometimes it's the ability to turn harsh conditions into an advantage." As news of Earth's victory spread across the stars, something unprecedented happened. The refugee fleets began turning around. Species that had fled the swarm for generations were coming back, drawn by the story of the planet that fought back. Humanity had done more than survive. They had shown the galaxy a new way to fight, and the war was about to enter its final phase, taking the fight to the swarm's home territory. The war room aboard the EDS Thunder fell silent as Commander Wilson showed the captured swarm star maps. After 6 months of preparing, humanity was ready to take the fight to enemy territory. The Void Swarm started their invasion from these systems. Wilson pointed to a cluster of stars. "Thanks to the ships we captured at Earth, we now know their weakness. They can't handle rapid environmental changes." General Stone studied the holographic display. Around her stood not just human officers, but representatives from a dozen alien species that had returned to join the fight. They called themselves the New Alliance. "Show them the plan," Stone ordered. Wilson nodded and brought up images of humanity's new weapons. "We've built what we call environmental warfare ships. Each one carries a scaled-down version of Earth's weather control technology." The alien representatives murmured in amazement as they saw the designs. Humanity had taken the lesson of Earth's defense and made it mobile. "But that's not all," Wilson continued. "We've trained Alliance crews in our combat methods. The swarm expects perfect order. We'll give them chaos." The first target was a swarm breeding world. As the human-led fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, they found exactly what the captured data had shown: a planet perfectly controlled with unchanging conditions. Commander Ana Martinez, leading the first wave, gave the order that started humanity's counterattack: release the storms. The environmental warfare ships moved into position around the swarm world. Within minutes, they created something the planet had never experienced: weather. Storms formed in skies that had never seen rain. Temperatures swung wildly in areas that had been climate controlled for centuries. The swarm's response was immediate, and exactly what humanity had predicted. Their ships tried to form their usual perfect patterns, but now faced an enemy that knew their playbook. "Stormwalkers, you're up," Martinez ordered. Drop pods streaked through the artificial storms, carrying human and allied troops trained in Earth's harsh combat methods. Where the swarm expected order, they found calculated randomness. Where they looked for patterns, they found controlled chaos. Captain Reed, now commanding his own ship of former refugees trained in human tactics, watched in amazement as the battle unfolded. "They're falling apart," he reported. "Their whole society is built on perfect control. They don't know how to handle disruption." The battle for the first swarm world lasted just 6 hours. When it ended, humanity had captured not just a planet, but everything they needed to understand their enemy better. "Look at this," Dr. Wells said, examining captured swarm technology. "They've engineered their entire species to depend on stable conditions. That's why they consume worlds. They're trying to make the galaxy as controlled as their home systems." The knowledge changed everything. In the next month, the Alliance liberated 6 more systems. Each time, they used the same strategy: disrupt the perfect conditions the swarm needed, then strike while they tried to restore order. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During the 8th battle, a young lieutenant named Mike Rogers noticed something in the swarm's behavior. "They're not just losing," he reported to command. "They're getting slower. Each time we introduce chaos to their systems, it takes them longer to reorganize. Wells studied the data and made an astounding discovery. The swarm doesn't adapt. They've spent so many generations in controlled environments that they've lost the ability to evolve and change. This revelation led to humanity's masterstroke. Instead of destroying swarm worlds, they began changing them. Environmental warfare ships would alter the planet's conditions, forcing the swarm to either adapt or flee. "We're not just beating them," General Stone told the Alliance Council. "We're making them face the one thing they've tried to eliminate from the galaxy, the need to adapt and grow stronger through adversity." As the campaign continued, more refugee species returned to join the fight. They had fled from a perfect enemy, only to discover that imperfection, humanity's greatest perceived weakness, was actually the key to victory. The Void Swarm, for the first time in their history, was learning a lesson humanity had known since its beginning. Those who never face adversity never learn to overcome it. Victory was no longer a question of if, but when. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy was about to learn why Earth's harsh conditions had created the perfect warriors to face this threat. 10 years after humanity's first contact with Captain Reed, the galaxy had changed forever. The final battle against the Void Swarm's home system wasn't fought with massive fleets or planet-destroying weapons. Instead, it ended with a simple choice. Commander Wilson stood on the bridge of the EDS Thunder, looking at the swarm's origin world through the main viewport. Behind him stood General Stone, Dr. Wells, and Captain Reed. They had all aged during this long war, but their eyes showed the pride of those who had accomplished the impossible. "Send the message," General Stone ordered. Wilson nodded and activated the communication system. His voice would reach not just the swarm's leaders, but every species in the galaxy watching this historic moment. "This is Commander Wilson of Earth's Defense Force. You have two options. Either adapt to survive in a changing galaxy, or we will use our environmental warfare ships to make your worlds as harsh as Earth. The choice is yours." The response came within an hour. For the first time in their history, the Void Swarm surrendered. They had finally met a force they couldn't overcome, the need to adapt or die. Back on Earth, the Global Defense Center had become the headquarters of the new Galactic Defense Alliance. Representatives from hundreds of species filled its halls, all eager to learn from humanity's example. "I still can't believe it," Captain Reed said, watching alien soldiers training with Stormwalker instructors in the harsh conditions of the Sahara Desert. "When I first came to warn Earth, I thought I was seeing the end of another world. Instead, I witnessed the birth of a new age." Dr. Wells smiled as he showed Reed his latest project, a training program that would teach other species how to thrive in difficult conditions. "We're not just teaching them to fight," he explained. "We're teaching them to grow stronger through adversity." The changes spread across the galaxy. Species that had spent generations running from challenges began establishing colonies on harsher worlds. They built training centers that simulated Earth's conditions, learning to adapt and become stronger. General Stone, now leading the Galactic Defense Force, stood before the Alliance Council to present humanity's most ambitious project yet. "We're calling it the Crucible Program," she announced. "A series of training worlds, each designed to challenge different species in different ways. Because we've learned that true strength doesn't come from avoiding hardship, it comes from facing it." In orbit above Earth, the museum ship that had once been Captain Reed's refugee vessel now served as a reminder. Millions visited it each year, learning how a warning of doom had instead become the catalyst for the galaxy's transformation. Commander Wilson, teaching a class of alien cadets at the New Earth Defense Academy, often told his students the key lesson of the war. The Void Swarm wasn't defeated by our weapons. They were defeated by their own fear of change and chaos. They spent so long trying to make the galaxy perfect, they forgot that imperfection is what drives evolution. As decades passed, Earth became known as something new in the galaxy. Not just the world that had defeated the swarm, but the planet that had taught the galaxy how to stop running and start fighting. One day, 50 years after the war, an elderly Captain Reed stood with the last surviving members of Earth's original defense team. They watched as ships from 1,000 worlds performed a memorial flight over New York, where he had first landed with his warning. "You know what the history books got wrong," he said to General Stone, both of them now retired but still respected throughout the galaxy. "They say Earth chose to fight when the galaxy chose to run. But that's not quite right." "Oh?" Stone asked, though she was smiling like she knew what he would say. "Earth didn't just choose to fight," Reed continued. "You chose to teach the rest of us how to fight too. You showed us that running from adversity only makes you weaker, while facing it makes you stronger." The sky above them, filled with ships of all shapes and sizes, crewed by beings from countless worlds. But they all had one thing in common. They had learned Earth's greatest lesson. Sometimes, the harshest worlds produce the strongest spirits. And in the end, that was humanity's true legacy. Not just as the species that stopped running, but as the ones who taught the galaxy to stand and fight.